What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Age of Quarantine. I'm David Castillo from Saint Vitus. Pleasure to be hanging out with you all on this wonderful Monday. Cheers. We got a Sea Dragon from Asbury Park Brewery. Delicious little beer that I am going to be drinking while talking to my good friend, Ben Greenberg. I fucking love Ben, man. Ben's amazing. He's an incredible guitar player, a fucking awesome producer, and has been in some of my favorite bands over the years. So without further ado, let's get Ben on the fucking line. Here we go. Let's do it. What's up, Chris? Ben,
Hey, bud.
my friend, my
How are you?
How are you doing? I haven't seen you in so long.
I know, I miss you.
I know, man. It's been way too long. Where are we at, Ben? You in Brooklyn right now?
I'm in Queens. I live in Maspeth.
Oh, big Maspeth guy, huh? Yeah. Right. Yeah. We are talking to a true New Yorker here, folks. Born in the boroughs, native. Not like some fucking poser like me. This is the real fucking shit right here. Don't often imitated, never duplicated. Ben Greenberg.
I am, in fact, a real New York pizza. Mm-hmm. I've lived in every borough except Staten at this point. No offense.
That's something.
No offense, Staten. Much love to Staten. I just haven't done it.
Shaolin, we ain't got no beef with Shaolin, but you know, just Ben hasn't lived there. I don't know what that says about
yeah, I'm just saying not yet.
Yeah, it's a big not yet. So then we, here at the Age of Quarantine, we like to just get into everybody's stories, trying to take an hour-long arc of basically your journey in music. And this is always a lot of fun because even when I know people really well, you don't really dig in like this. You don't really get to like interview your friends in this way. So I'm looking forward to learning a lot. So like I mentioned, Ben was born and raised in Manhattan. Was that you, Manhattan?
Yeah, when I was born, my family lived in Chelsea on 16th and 7th. I was born in Bentonville. There's a story about that. My mom took the bus across town.
That's sick, dude. Wow.
Yeah, I'm the younger sibling, so, by the time she had me, she was like, oh, I got this.
Yeah. I don't want to spend a cab fare, sweetie.
Yeah.
Like, she's already teaching life lessons.
Yeah.
At that point.
Born on a bus.
born on a bus. Ben Greenberg. So when was like kind of the earliest sort of experiences with music? When did you start being attracted to music? Was your family like a musical family? What was the vibe there?
Not particularly. I have some like extended relatives, like my mom's uncle, her dad's brother, played the clarinet, like professionally for years, and actually buried in that cemetery where like Duke Ellington was buried and Miles and stuff. I forget which one. It's in the Bronx, but he kind of requested to be buried there because it's full of so many famous jazz musicians. Stuff.
Oh wow!
But that's really as close as like a musical family as I get. It's like a great uncle. But I do remember seeing Jerry Lee Lewis on a PBS special when I was like 4 or 5 or something. Like early footage, setting a piano on fire and dancing on it, screaming at people. I think it was on PBS.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, "Oh, that's what I want to do."
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, for me, it was like my brothers are into watching MTV. It was the '80s, and like Guns N' Roses was on. They were like, "Yo, check this out. This is what we fuck with," And it was it was just like I was so young, it was like 4 or 5, and it stuck with me. That Michael Jackson, the pop of start of the sort of the day, right?
But man, the records that like our parents had in the house in like the mid-late 80s, like I remember it was the same for me. They had Thriller, they had Graceland. It was like, these were the biggest selling records of the day, but they're also incredible. You know?
Like really fucking good. Yeah, like
really, really.
My sister was obsessed with George Michael, so I love George Michael. And like amazing singer. And it was really interesting too because it was like my parents didn't really listen to much English sung music, you know, not a ton.
Oh,
So it was
sure.
really like that was like just like I was like, oh, this is what music over here is about, you know.
That's
Um, yeah. So what were kind of things after your Jerry Lee revival? What were some of the earliest kind of groups that you were into or feeling that you were enamored with as like a youngster?
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, after that, I started asking for a guitar pretty immediately, and
Right there.
yeah,
Wow.
like pretty much right away. I didn't get one until I was 7 because I was too little to hold one. I started taking drum lessons when I was 6, and that guy got me into, like he was a Buddy Rich guy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I remember listening to like early, kind of that era big band music, and like earlier 50s, maybe more quote unquote palatable, whatever, Italian dude. Um, but after that, man, God, I mean, because I started playing music and taking lessons and stuff at such a young age, I didn't really encounter music in like a social context until later than a lot of people. I
Yeah.
started playing music with other people when I was really young, but a lot of it was like within this context of like a after school thing, kids I knew from school that were just messing around. It wasn't until I was 13, 14, um, that I started playing in like a band that actually like would play shows and make with other bands or
Sure. And
whatever.
that's really the time where you like are developing your own taste and sort of
Yeah,
aesthetics are like important. You're like, nah, man, I don't wear these clothes. I wear these clothes and I do these sort of,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
don't fuck with me, man. I
Yeah, for
skateboard,
sure.
live in a fucking vision of disorder. Don't talk to me. But yeah, it's like one of those things where you're like, what's interesting to me is like people who play from when they're like kids, like 7, 8, 9, like I played like the recorder when I was 5 for like a hot
Yeah,
second, and then it just like gave up. And then I realized that like playing in a band would be like fucking cool. And then I'm like, huh, maybe I can go and do that. Like I'm
yeah.
big or strong or like there are a lot of things I was like kind of bad at, but I think I might be able to do this. But you were diligently plugging away to be good for a long time. So I'm sure you got kind of asked to be in the bands probably quicker than I did. What was it like just growing up in New York City, being in that time, like when you were 14 and 15, and just trying to put stuff together? What were the places that you liked to go as a kid and kind of find
It
out?
and it was super bleak here because the city didn't have all ages outside of ABC, and I wasn't a cool kid, so it wasn't like a part of that community. I mean, all respect to those kids, friends now, but back then, a lot of the Toxic State kids were like they're 5 years younger, so, they weren't even around yet. So the people that were around were like, I was a punk, you know what I mean? Like kind of like you were just saying, I came from the opposite angle on the band where I was like this really nerdy like music kid who could play really well and like really shy, I didn't make friends. So I didn't really like even bloom socially until after 18 years old. I mean, and that's because the band that I was in started traveling at that point. And so I started actually making friends outside of what was here. But yeah, to answer your question, when I was like a young teen here starting to play shows and shit, we would play anywhere that would let us, like see, because we were all most years old, which just had to be to go to shows at the time. So it was CB's nights, and then maybe they would let us in, they would pick us out after the set, after past the audition. And there was a place called Baby that was on the Lower East Side for a while. Just whatever lower clubs would have us, because you remember 9/11. That's where the shows were in the city. There weren't. Yeah. After that, it was done. You know what I mean? But like through the end of the '90s, through the like Silent Night stuff when they close everything down, I got in right before that. So yeah, my middle school had were just playing like gigs. We were just like gigging on
Yeah,
the
whatever. High school cafeteria, right? Like anything.
yeah,
I think it's
like
funny that, sometimes I think people think because somebody's from New York City or something like that, like they had like all these things at their fingertips, and that's why I sort of ask it, right? It's like that's not necessarily true, and unfortunately, I know that I do shows, and I'd like to do more all ages shows, whatever, but it's very difficult, and the city doesn't make it easy. And the rules just really don't make it easy to have youth involved in music, which is really fucking sad.
Yeah, no, that's still true. Like that was very real as a young musician here. Like there weren't DIY shows or like scenes that are a part of here really, unless we were, you know, I mean, back then it was street punks, right? Now it's egg punks or whatever, but we weren't street punks. We're just like kids that were into weird shit and like being obnoxious. Really feel like we had a so it wasn't until I think maybe when I was 14 we started catching rides to Connecticut, LI. Actually were DIY shows and like scenes and that was mostly hardcore bands that were around that would like we'd make friends with someone through the internet thing or like drummer in our band lived in West. Everyone else, but the drummer lived in Western, kind of border of Connecticut, so he had a lot of friends Western Connecticut around the like Hartford, New Haven, Dan. So I was playing all these teen centers for years. I played so many in Connecticut than I did in the city when I was
funny. Yeah, I remember that would be sort of true of the island as well, which is where I grew up. I grew up on Long Island, hence the vision of the reference earlier. Yeah, so you were in this group, you were kind of playing, in and around the city. When I kind of met you, you were in a great band called Pygmy Shrews, which I absolutely loved. I thought that band was fucking great. And you actually would play with Berdan's old band, Drunk Driver, a lot and stuff like that. And I'd see, you guys and like Double Negative and like a bunch of this sort of stuff that was kind of permeating. How did you sort of start kind of developing that band and sort of getting involved in that sort of scene? Because that's where, like, for me, I've known Ben for close to a decade. That's like kind of like the jumping off point for myself.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's when I finally started to find a foothold wanted to do. It's funny because quick aside, the Pygmy Shrews Facebook page got hacked yesterday.
What?
Someone hacked it, put up like a Peppy the Frog making like a love hand, and like erased everything on it. I was like, oh,
these are the things we have to worry about nowadays.
Right? This is what it is. The Pygmy Shrews grew out of that. So the high school band, the band I was in high school was called The Fugue, and it was like a noise rock. It was very kind of Jesus Lizardy, but that not really as tight at all. We were.
I mean, who is?
Besides them, yeah, true. We were very into like some of the 3-1-G and some related like post type stuff. That was a lot of listening to at the time, but there weren't a lot of that in New York or around the area. It was really just hardcore what kids were making and listening to. We were kind of the weirdos. That's why we didn't really have a scene because, the band digging were like West Canada, South, or whatever weren't really local. The Fugue, through many members over many years. Conrad, who plays guitar in the band Soft Kill now, was a member of the Fugue for years. Ben Shapiro, and, a million bands, and he's like a Spotify. He was in the Fugue, and it was like our high school band.
Wow!
And
I never knew that. I never knew the carousel of members that kind of went through that, and that was really like the incubator for all these. At least learn how to play with one another, right?
that was, you know, that was the band that had a million side projects that all of us knew about. And like that was like our clique. 6 of us instead of, you know, what people do in an actual music scene. It was just us continuing to make new bands together. Eventually the singer of the Fugue moved down to the south, and so that, and we were like, okay, we do. The guy that recently started playing drums in the band at that point was this from LA, and just continue to try and, you know, maybe you should, maybe Kia, you know, maybe you should try. He really pushed us, and that, you know, I got to credit him for that. As much negativity as he ultimately brought into, he was also the drummer in Drunk Driver, so that was how Bredan and I met.
Which is really interesting because it's like I never really thought about this until you know, you guys really started playing together. But I'm like, wow, yeah, you know, these fools, they go back like a long ways.
Yeah.
And I just really kind of like never thought of it, and then it was like, oh yeah, like no shit, they're gonna make some shit and it'll be cool, you know? Like I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes so much sense. But so this is a meeting that goes back well over a decade.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, Bredan and I have known each other for, yeah, absolutely, like 13, 14 years, something like that. I mean, I recorded all the Drunk Driver records besides the first demo.
Oh, really? I didn't know that you could do that shit too. Look at that. He's got hands in everything.
Look at these.
Yeah, man. They can do anything. They can play. They can move the knobs. You know, a lot of dexterity.
I had started recording before that. You know, I had started recording my own bands when I was like 17 or 18.
What was the impetus for that? Why did you feel like you wanted to record them as opposed to go to like the studio or do other things?
I did that. I was in the Fugue and I was 13, 14. I'm out of weed. I'm so jealous.
Yeah, I'm in the Fugue zone. I'm in the Fugue zone.
Yeah. Get into that.
I feel amazing.
When I was 13, 14, and I was in the first starting out with studios, we recorded with these Andy Axe. Andy was,
sorry, Ben, you're breaking up a little bit. Do you think you can maybe move the phone around a little bit?
Yeah.
Totally. All right, cool. You better now.
All right, cool. So we recorded with these guys, Andy Action and Chuck Scott. Andy was the drummer of the band Two Skinny Jays. You remember that band?
Yeah, I remember that shit.
Andy was cool. He was a dude. He was probably younger than me now when he was recording us back then, you know what I mean? And that's kind of trippy to think about. But it was him and Chuck wound up playing in the band Baby, which was Craig Wedren's band after Shudder to Think.
Oh, shit. That's cool.
So it's like those dudes.
Chuck knows all about that. He's a big
Chuck
thing.
Also played in a band with, not with Walter, but with the other guitar player from Rival Schools, whose name unfortunately escapes me. I'm sorry.
Ian.
But yeah, Ian. Thank you. Yeah, they had a band called Tokyo Rose.
I've seen Tokyo Rose. Got it. I'm in, baby. I'm in.
Oh, all right. So the guitar player from Tokyo Rose and the drummer from Two Skinny Jays were my studio experience for the most part. When I was really little, you know, and that was kind of the first time I saw. Well, actually, the first time I saw a recording studio was in my very first kind of mess around band when I was like 11 with these kids that were a little older than me, and one of them had like a cousin who was in a studio in this building off the West Side Highway that's still there and still an industrial building somehow. It's like right next to where all the Trump buildings are. But I still, every time I drive up the West Side Highway, I look at that building. I'm like, how did they do that? But I guess it was the 90s, whatever. And that's like 95 or 96 too. So that's like way back. But that's the first time I was ever in a real studio. And then, you know, I was in a band that made a bunch of recordings in a few different studios as those guys moved around the Lower East Side. And I started working in a studio in Ditmas Park when I was 15. I worked there for 2 summers. It's called Systems 2. I think they're still there. They did October Rust. They did there, and Blood Kisses. Yeah. Yeah,
Big
and
Ben fucking Greenberg. That's so
I
tight.
wasn't there for that, man. That's before my time, but you know, that
Yeah,
was kind of their big claim to fame. Those are the records on the wall.
totally. Yeah, yeah. Like the
They
ones.
also did like they were like Blue Note's first call studio, so I got to work like a John Scofield session, and
Wow.
that's actually where I met Tim Dahl from the band Child Abuse. I
Oh,
met him when
wow.
I was 16 years old as the assistant engineer on a session that he was doing.
That's so crazy, man.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's really interesting to kind of, I always think it's interesting when people, I feel like you're kind of the mind that you like to find out how things work, and there are people who are like, I play guitar, and there are people who are like about guitar, and they're like, I take it apart, I know the pedals, I know how to, I could solder and rewire and throw in new pickups, do all that great kind of stuff. And it's a really interesting thing to kind of, there are people who are like, I'm fine playing it, and then I'll know what I need to kind of get by. But then you see that a little bit from its early age too. The people who have that inquisitive mind and kind of want to go inside making music. And that's really interesting, because it's like you were in these recording studios and you're like, I want to occupy these spaces from like that early of an age. Like,
way early, man. I got a 4-track when I was 10.
Yeah, like, that's nuts to me though, because it's like, look, wanting to play guitar and seeing somebody on stage when you're young and being like, yeah, I want to be like that's great. And there's examples of that kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
But being this is a little bit more, it's a little more behind the scenes. It's a little bit more intuitive as far as if you want it or not, right?
Yeah, and it's also
real early.
It's also less social. You know what I mean? Like the studio is a very specific dynamic, and like being drawn to it, people want to be in bands when they're teenagers because, everybody knows the answer to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, dude.
Nobody's like, oh man, I want to fucking mix records because I'm going to get so laid. Like,
I want 12-hour days.
Nobody has ever said that, ever.
Exactly. That's why you're so fucking pure. You're so pure. You're like one of the real ones, That's what I was trying to tease out here. So you started just making your own records at a certain point when you just got comfortable with you. You were like, all right, I'm cool. Like, I feel like I know enough, and now I'm gonna start trying my hand at actually trying to do it. So you were learning multiple disciplines pretty much too. Like, hey, I'm gonna play guitar in the band. I'm gonna do all that, and that's something that's obviously followed you as you've kind of progressed in your like kind of musical life, right?
Oh, sure. And I mean, again, like, I don't forget, I didn't stop playing drums. So all through my I was always in 5-6 bands at a time.
That's wild.
That was what I was, you know what I mean? And like, there was a conscious once I got once I was getting into, I remember making a decision to be like, all right, I'm just going to do 1 or 2 things now because I'm getting into like real life and I need to focus and I want this to be good. I need to focus. And, once I started touring really young too, but once I started like really touring in bands, it was like, okay, there's only really time to do maybe 2 projects, you know what I mean? Because you still have to work and be home and have a girlfriend and live a life, and you know what I mean, like.
And that's something that we get into like on this show like often too, is like, as at a certain point, you're a kid and you're like, I'm unwieldy and I can just like, I want to throw shit at the wall, and wouldn't it be cool to be in like a metal band, but like the singer's a bird, like Hate Beat.
Yeah.
But then like later.
Speaking of, how was Blake? Was that cool talking to Blake?
Yeah, it was great. I was like, I'm only going to talk about Hate Beat for 5 minutes. It was really fun. But the thing about it is, as you get older, or as you sort of maybe professionalize yourself a little bit more, there's an economy of time. There's hard choices to make, and those choices will really like inform how far or how little or what the band is going to sort of do or not. And like, they become hard choices, right? You're like, home life, being away and stuff. Was that dynamic more presented in Pygmy Shrews at first, or was it more presented when you joined the Men?
I mean, actually, that's exactly what I was about to say. when I was a teenager playing in a bunch of bands and stuff, like, because I was so just about it, I wound up being, so I'm like lighting where I'm at for you.
Oh, good, man. You got a great kitchen. It's fine. We can do it however you want, baby.
Dude, Maspeth is sick. I'm just saying.
Yeah, okay. I'm fine. Watch out.
Because I was the one that was like the most about it and playing in a bunch of bands and played a bunch of instruments and was starting to record us and all of that, you know, I wound up kind of band dadding a lot of stuff. Doing, you know, tour driving or some amount of booking, or, you know, I was always the one when someone was going to get kicked out of the fugue, I always had to tell them. You know, it was always on me.
You were the fugue executioner. Unbelievable. They're like, Ben's got to talk to you. You're like,
but that was the first really hard one, actually. I was thinking about this the other day. You know, when I was recording the message for years, and we were buds.
Yes, let's peel back for a minute for just for our sake. So Ben has produced the first couple of Men records. There's a great band on Sacred Bones, super cool kind of rock and roll, hardcore-ish in between thing. The records are great, and then Ben actually left the producer's chair and joined as bass player or guitar player or third guitar player. I don't even know. Multi-instrumental.
Really, you know what I mean? Like I initially joined filling in for Chris. The first time I played with them, it was the Men and Pygmy Shrews went on tour together, and Chris couldn't come, and they asked me if I would fill in for him. And I was like, sure, you know, like, you know that. Why not? If it means my band gets to go on tour with your band, yeah, of course I'll do that. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I want to do that. Sure,
I've done some great shows with that exact lineup at Saint Vitus, so I seen it.
Yeah,
and those shows are fucking great, and packed. People having a blast, bars going off. Like, the whole thing was beautiful. It's like, yeah, why not bring that on the road, you know?
Yeah, those were really good times. That was a really amazing tour too, you know, like, it was really fun. I will remember that Chicago show forever. I remember it was, every time we're in Chicago, I wound up driving past the building because it's like around the corner from the Empty Bottle. So we always wound up passing away from the highway. But it was in this loft. I think Ryan Downey lived there. I don't remember. It was like second floor, spiral staircase. They built a bar into it, and it was just a couple people lived there and they had shows. I forget what it was called, but I do remember in between two Pygmy Shrews songs being really drunk and saying, "Oh man, Chicago's great. It's just like New York." And everyone just started throwing their beers.
Very aggressive Chicago. Very aggressive.
You gotta let them know.
You know, hey. Second City, maybe there's like a middle sibling thing. I don't.
Yeah.
We don't have to go into it. I love you, Chicago.
I love Chicago. Chicago's awesome. It's just like New York.
Yeah. I love New York, so I love Chicago. It's amazing. So you joined the band, and like this, you know, the Men was, I mean, it was it was like a band that was primed to tour a lot, do a lot, you know, play festivals. You know, they were right at that level, and that's really when you joined. And I feel like that's like walking into like a fucking job. That's like a different level.
Very much so. And that was getting back to what spurred this part of the talk. So before, you know, after that tour, they were like, look, it's not working out with Chris, you know, we're gonna get to go to Europe for the first time. He doesn't have a passport. Like, do you want to, obviously we work well together, do you want to just join the band? And I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, of course. I had already toured Europe with Z's a couple times. I was like, oh yeah, I know how to do that. Yeah, no problem. Like, I can help you guys out. Sure. And after I did that, I kind of looked around and realized, like, that was really the moment where I was like, okay, I can't be in a lot of bands. I need to, you know, and I sat down, and Pygmy Shrews were on our second drummer by that point, who was, you know, a really sweet human being, Alexander Pirelli, and not a problematic person at all. And people sometimes get that confused, and they shouldn't.
Yeah.
But Alexander's wonderful, and sat down with him and Tia and was like, I don't think it's fair to either of you for me to pretend like I can be in this band if I'm going to do this other band. I'm really sorry. They asked me to join. I said, yeah, I love you guys. It was hard. It was a hard conversation to have.
Totally, man, because it's like, this is legitimate, like, life decisions, right? It's like, and these are like deep relationships, you know, you don't make music.
Tia and I met when I was 12.
She was in a huge band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's my
if
person.
You're deep through, you're deep.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And that was a big moment to sit down with them and be like, I'm really sorry. I'm also a people pleaser. So, you know, I don't like having the hard conversations already, and especially back then. So that was really hard to do, you know?
Yeah.
But it was, I think it was the right thing to do. I don't know how much more music Pygmy Shoes had in us at the time, or I should say how much I had in me for Pygmy Shoes at the time. And I was really excited by this new thing, and it was a band that I already understood, and I already had a lot of ideas for where to take it too, and they were pretty receptive right off the bat. And it seemed to gel with kind of what they had in mind and where they wanted to go and stuff. And we had a really productive, like, dynamic of sharing music with each other. You know, we fueled each other's obsession.
It gave like a bigger platform for the things that you wanted to do as well. And that's something that's, again, it's difficult, especially when you have people that you care about. You don't play just music with anyone. There's a lot of shared stuff and you know, like, just friendship, relationship, all of that in making music. And it's something that's, like, important. And when you have to make those moves, it's like, it's a big deal. And especially when you're younger and you're not as self-aware, like you were saying. It's like, you know, sometimes, you know, maybe I think back and I'm like, man, I could have been, like, nicer to that person, or you know, different things that maybe at the time you thought you had to be a certain way, and maybe not, right? And so you can go back a little bit, but you also learn a lot about that and how you can, you know, just manage life in general. And also, you know, what kind of thing that you want to be a part of. Well, you wanted to be part of that kind of band, a band that was, you know, we're going and we're touring Europe, we're doing a lot of records in it. So
yeah, I mean, I would have been a fool not to do that. You know, we had just we were already working on music together a lot. We had just put out Open Your Heart. You know, I produced the record. You know, it was their record, but that's how we talk about records as producers. We had just put Your Heart. They had done a really long U.S. tour with Chris on it, and then, you know, didn't. And basically, we're set up to, like, kill it. Yeah. And I didn't really have a full picture in my mind of what that meant, but it was exciting to think about. And I had done some of the things that they were poised to do already, and a lot I saw in their future that I hadn't done before. I wanted to try, and I didn't see a way to do that, any other way to do that. You know what I mean?
And also, it was something that, again, was also very organic, because your previous work, this is a thing that was offered to you based on the strength of them knowing your musical profile and acumen and the things that you've been doing. So you join up with the band, right? And you're in it, and you're doing it, and you're kind of moving all over the place. You're from the producer's chair to the guitar to the stage and stuff like that. What was it like just joining the men, jumping into that fray? And you know, I remember seeing you guys Pitchfork Fest or things of that, and just being like, holy shit, this is going off right now. Like, I was like,
we played Primavera, and our slot was in between Napalm Death and that was where they put us.
Yeah.
I was on a lot of Molly.
Yeah. All right. Primavera Fest. Go with Ben Greenberg. You'll have a time. Not bad. I like that. And yeah, I'm sure, man. And great guys like, you know, Mark and all those dudes, you know, from then Rich Samus. I grew up with him. I joined a band just to hang out with Rich fucking Samus. He's amazing.
Yeah, that's
and a great drummer and a really cool person. So, did it kind of fulfill kind of your expectations as far as like, you know, doing those things? And what did you kind of learn from like being in that band? Because it kind of started without you, you know, and so you didn't have the original kind of like kernel of it, but you took it further. How was just kind of feeling like jumping in midstream like that?
Man, I learned so much. I think I was in that band for 3 or 4 years, and I learned so much. I mean, I thought that I had toured a lot. You know what I mean? Like, I was in I think I was 24. So, you know, I had already been to Europe a few times. I had toured the States a lot, kind of on my own, you know, DIY. And we had like opened for bands with booking agents, and, you know, we were like, I was like, oh, I kind of have a handle on like what this is all about and what's possible and what it's like. And I had no idea. You know what I mean? And I joined the band.
This is the like
year or something. You
this
know
is
what I mean?
there's levels to this game moment.
Yeah, 100%. I had no idea what I was talking about. You know what I mean? And to be fair, I think for most of the time I was in the Men, I also had no idea what I was talking about. I think that those were definitely, you know, combination of walking into an exciting situation and also being in my mid-20s. I think that those were definitely the years where I was maybe the most out of pocket, just to be around as a dude in general.
Yeah.
You know, which is just looking back, I feel like that's just true. That's cool. You know,
yeah, sure.
all friends now, you know what I mean? I love those dudes. I respect the shit out of them. They're so talented and fun to be around and funny. But yeah, I mean, I learned so much about how to tour, how to prep, how to talk to people, like, how to deal with crazy jet lag, how to deal with crazy bandmates. You know, we went through the whole special together, and like, I wound up leaving, you know, on bad terms. Not like bad, but, you know, raw for sure, because I didn't like it anymore, and they clearly didn't like me being there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I remember that a little bit, you know, just being friends with you. And I just remember a conversation that we had, and you just sort of kind of like, didn't really say anything, but it was just kind of like, like, just like my spider sense is just like, you know, like that didn't go so well, which I was surprised, because if you know all of the people involved in the Men and yourself too, I'm like, this is a real affable group. Like, I love all these guys.
Yeah.
You know? I'm like, I used to go skateboarding with Rich, and like, you know, when we were kids and stuff. I was like, that's really weird. But it's also part of the stories that you hear and the cliches you hear of burnout and certain, you know, maybe things not going your particular way, or maybe you didn't see the kind of the road and how hard it might be, or certain things to get certain places. And see what the expectations are meets what the reality is, meets like, hey, I understand how to be in bands. I think this happens often to a lot of bands. You know, they're like really talented, cool, like they have maybe not even a lot the expectations to begin with, but they think they know certain things, and as they kind of keep moving up, the goalposts sort of keep moving, and you kind of don't see everything correct. You know,
and it's exhausting. That's the thing. The amount of work that goes into being a band like that, it's tremendous, and it's all-consuming. It's beyond. People don't really think about that point. You know, I was already recording people, touring, kind of full timing it. I mean, I think, let me think. Yeah. I had already quit my last job when I joined the Men. My last job was at Zebulon when it was in New York. I was there for 2 years. And I quit Zebulon once I was making enough money recording, you know, that I choose, basically.
You made the switch. You're like, I don't need the day job anymore. Music's my life. I'm in.
Yeah. So
what
I was
recording at that point where you felt like, you know, you were kind of getting to a place, because I remember kind of constantly, and I did feel like obviously the Men stuff, since it got so popular, it was really you know, beyond that, it's like, you know, for you, it's like a double kind of thing because you ended up joining the band, but since the records are so popular, you know, people must have, you know, kind of been like, I want to fucking work with this dude. Who is he? Who's this beautiful band from?
For sure. You know what I mean? And it's been that way. It's been word of mouth kind of the whole way. And I'm really fortunate for that. I'm super, super for that, man. Like,
totally.
Keep making a living of the work that I'm doing. I'll keep working. Seek me out. Like, I'm so lucky for that. That's more than I imagined. You know, when I was a little kid, my first few years of guitar lessons and thinking about what it must be like to be in a band and whatever, what I dream of as a life for myself was being in a band, making records, touring, and recording other people. That was all I wanted to do. You know what I mean?
It's like being able to actually pull off having that kind of life is not an easy thing, and also it takes a meticulous kind of a bit of planning, but also designing it in like a certain image. So that obviously brings us to Uniform, right? Because now we have, you know, Ben's gone through like these different arcs. You know, you've kind of seen the band with a ton of buzz kind of go all the way up, but maybe not built for longevity. Maybe more of like a drag racer than like a sedan.
Yeah.
And you know, and then you kind of also are like, my production career is growing. Like that aspect of things is now growing in a certain realm. What was it like being like, okay, I'm out of this band.
Yeah.
I understand so much more about like the musical sort of landscape and also the business side of it, a lot of things. Now I'm trying to achieve what I set out to do, right? Which was, I do want to play, I want to be an artist, and I want to record people. Was that like a moment where you're like, I'm going to try and design this life, like as a total like vision kind of thing? Or was it more like, okay, let's just like keep recording stuff because it's there, but then I'm going to get with Berdan and then like, we'll see what happens?
It was a bit of both, honestly. You know, pretty long view on myself kind of all the time. Like my folks pushed me really hard when I was a kid to have a work ethic and follow through on what I supposed to do, and also my dad
a little bit, Ben. You mind moving the phone a little bit?
Yeah. My dad is an immigrant as well. He came from South Africa and made his way. And so when I started talking to him about wanting to do music, even when I was really little, when it was like not even a career thing, he was still then, he was like, okay, like, we'll get you a guitar, but that's it, you know? And like, you need to figure out what you want to do with it, and you need to study. And if you really want to do this, you know, when I started playing shows and stuff when I was a teenager, he'd be like, you know, you need to have a plan, because you can't just have fun forever. You know? That's not exactly how you put it, but you get the idea. I think everybody who's a musician pretty much gets that talking about.
My mom and my dad, so they've been to Saint Vitus twice. And my mom, I invited her to go see a show after it was open for like 5 years. And I was finally like, all right, it's time to go like do this. And she knew that I was doing it, but and both my parents own their own businesses. And you know, I'm first generation Colombian, so they were very much the same way. Like, all right, man, you could be into all the weird shit you want, but like, you know, you're getting an education. You gotta hustle, and like, but you can like make it. Like, you can do stuff, which was cool. It was a bit of both, like you were saying. But
there's a press there, but it's also a push, you know.
Yeah. There's like, but you gotta make it real. Like, like, no fuck, don't fuck around, you know.
Don't fuck around. Exactly.
Yeah, it's like,
that's
you
fucking vibe.
like, dude, like, you gotta make it real. And so, you know, I brought my mom and my dad to go see Primitive Weapons and Mutoid Man on a Tuesday night, and it was fucking slammed, you know. And she's in like the sound booth and stuff, and my dad's there and stuff, and I'm like, after the show, they're like, Papi, this is crazy. And from that day, they were having so much fun. A bunch of friends are at the bar, like hanging out with them, but they understood that I actually like made this business like on this sort of like scale. And my mom kind of dissed me because she thought that not too many people would be there. She's like, I have to be honest. It was a Tuesday night, you know? It was hysterical. But at the same time, that's what they were pushing me towards. But they were like, you got something good going.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for you.
That's awesome.
You started to like, just do it. Just to like have something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's an important thing, you know, like that influence of like framing that for you. That was here. So was there a pull to be like, do I kind of go more towards production? It feels like it could be at home and a little bit more solid, or were we like, well,
honestly, no, because of Jerry Lee. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, no, because I gotta play, man. Like that's
you're too good not to. Fuck that. Like, I don't want to live in that world. That's.
I'm sure at some point, you know, I will be. I mean, by which I mean right now, I will be mostly making records and not playing shows.
For sure.
But you know, I'm sure that for real, by choice, at some point, that'll be the case as well later on. But no, I mean, it's always been half and half. They've always been complementary to each other. They've always helped each other out, you know. It's really important for me to maintain both, otherwise I'm not really. If I'm only on tour, I feel crazy. And if I'm only in the studio, I feel crazy too, for sure. That's very, very real. So yeah, you know, Uniform started to come together before I actually quit the band, if I'm being honest. Berdan and I were living on the same street. I had moved above Strange Weather on Graham Avenue, which is the recording studio that I've been working out of forever and ever and ever. It's where I tracked.
It's a beautiful studio that I actually recorded some vocals.
Yeah, you've been there.
With Ben, and it was an amazing experience, and it is a beautiful place. Yo, record with Ben is fucking tight, dude.
Thanks. We aim to please. I actually have. Well, we can get into that later, but. I was living above Strange Weather at the time. I had just moved in on the 3rd floor with Daniel, my dude, and Berdan had lived up the street for, I don't know, years, you know, like years and years and years. And so he and I hadn't really talked for about 5 years. Drunk Driver broke up. I broke up Pygmy Shrews. I had been touring with the Men. He kind of fell off. And then, you know, slowly kind of, thanks, Darcy. He kind of slowly brought himself back into band world after about 2 years of kind of disappearing from hanging out and being in public and stuff. So he and I hadn't seen each other in about 5 years. And, you know, when Drunk Driver ended, it was on really bad terms. And he and I were sort of, you know, we weren't super close back then. We were close and stuff, but we weren't like super close. So we kind of wound up on opposite sides of that situation. And so, you know, there wasn't like animosity or anything, but because that's how it had been left, it was 5 years of total radio silence. And I just ran into him on the street a couple of weeks after I moved in and was like blindsided, totally forgot that he lived there, totally didn't even know how to, I was like, how am I supposed to act towards you? Because of how we left things. And, you know, but he's Berdan, and it's impossible to not have a positive interaction with Berdan. He's a really positive, cool, like easy to talk to person who's like down for whatever conversation you have.
I lived across the street from him, and I would run into him very similarly.
I forgot about that.
So, I loved it. It was him and Lou and his dog, and it would be wonderful. So, but it's also, like, Mike's always got a beautiful energy to sort of like give, you know, as much as I've known him too. And I can imagine that. So when you guys get back together, how did it kind of start to go into like, hey, let's try and make some music kind of thing?
So we ran into each other, you know, with like some regularity. And, you know, the first time we kind of like, And then the second time it was kind of like, hey man, how you been? Like, how are you? You know, I haven't seen you in 5 years. What's your life like? You know, and really just immediately like closer than we'd ever been. Just really immediately kind of locked in mentally with each other, and we're like, oh, cool. Like, he's like, oh man, I see you've been, you know, doing this and that, and it's really cool to see you doing well, and you're so busy. And I was like, man, thank you so much. That means a lot. You know, I really missed you all this time. It's really cool to see you, and like, what are you up to? And sharing some music. And then one night I had a dream that he and I were on stage together, just the two of us. And the sound that I was hearing with us on stage was not super defined. It was just loud. That's my only memory, is just he and I on stage. I'm holding a guitar. There's no one else on stage. And just, you know, just this insane, overwhelming, like, spaceship landing noise happening. And I ran into him the next day and was like, hey, I had this dream. And he was like, do you want to try and maybe play some music? I was like, yeah. Probably, yeah. That's probably what that means, right? Like, we should do this? He was like, yeah, let's just give it a shot. You know what I mean? So he brought over, like, whatever gear he had. He owned, like, 2 drum machines and a synth, and brought them over, and we plugged them all into a little mixer, including my guitar and a microphone, into our living room stereo.
Yeah.
And just jammed. And we're pretty immediately like, oh, yeah, this is a band. This is definitely a band. Like,
yeah,
right there.
we could do something like that.
You know what I mean? He'd been in a bunch of bands in the interim. He'd been in Vane's, York Factory, that
Law, like
one band with Sean that I forget the name of, Believer Law, thank you. You know, and those were all situations where he was processing his voice a lot, singing through a lot of pedals, singing through a lot of distortion, a lot of effect.
Yeah.
And I remember even that early on being like, let's do this, but like, I don't want it to be that. Because when we were making the Drunk Driver records, it was just you in a room, and it sounded way scarier than all these effects. You know what I mean? Like,
the aesthetic starts becoming about the gear as opposed to the person.
Yeah, it can happen for sure. You know, and I'm always really worried about, because I'm a nerdy musician kid. I'm always like, you know, I grew up with a Squire. Like, I don't care, you know? Like, I'll play whatever.
Energy. I love that energy.
Yeah, man, that's the shit. Like, it's about the song, you know? Like, make me feel something. You don't have to have cool looking gear to make me feel something. So, you know, that was sort of where I was looking to differentiate it from what he had been up to. And obviously it was super different from what I'd been doing. I mean, this was like, I think right at the beginning of 2014. And so the men were about to put out Tomorrow's Hits, which was like the cleanest record we ever made. It just sounds like, you know, funky street band, like straight up and down, like it's clean, you know? So it was super different from everything I'd been doing. And it was much closer to what I had been doing back in like the mid-aughts when he and I were playing shows together and stuff. And I think it felt like a bit of a return for him as well, I think, at the time. So, yeah, you know,
I still remember the first time I saw you guys, and I'm not sure if it was Nothing Changes your first show?
That was our first show. We played for 2 minutes.
I was at the first Uniform show.
Yeah.
And DJ'd it. Everybody suck it. I was there. Ben wasn't even there. I was there. And like, no, it was a really fun show. But I remember, you know, I was DJing that night, and I remember, you know, just hearing about it, and it was you guys, and Nikki asked me to DJ. Yeah. And she's like, you know, they described it as this, and it's like this sort of industrial thing with guitars and stuff. It's like, you want to DJ? I was like, yeah, I love those guys. They're just cool. And like, I'm down. And I just remember the first time I saw Uniform, it wasn't quite the living room setup, but it was the bring as many amps as you possibly could setup. And Ben brought like 12 cabinets, and I was there for like 11 minutes. And then I think one of the cabinets fell off. Yep. And like blew up.
Yeah.
But those 11 minutes I like love them. And I was like, this is the band that I've been waiting for, honestly. Like, it was combining a lot of industrial and sort of punk and noise rock like elements, and I was like, dude, I like this fucking shit. This is cool. And then you just saw it sort of grow into so many different incarnations in between of like trying to figure out what that is.
Yeah, where it lands, what the formula is, like what
Like
we
who
can
cares?
do.
You were after the idea of it, and that's what's that. I think that sort of dream still remains, no matter how far it goes along. Or now you got, you know, Sharp in the mix, you know, a drummer in the mix who's amazing, is a great drummer, you know, and what you guys have been, you know, kind of iterating upon. It's very symbolic of like the relationship and like a broader, you know, vision or ideal. And I think that's always the best way to kind of come at a band, you know? It's like,
Yeah. I think so too, man. That's like, I like to see people thinking about their shit,
yeah,
working on it, and trying to challenge themselves. You know what I mean? And we've been trying to do that since day one. Like, I was never in a drum machine band before this. Like, we were punching above our weight. We've been doing that the whole time, and hope that we never stop. Once, you know what I mean? I think that was something that I learned from years of touring in other bands too. Not just the Men, but lots of other bands. Like, once it becomes too easy, it's like not fun anymore. You know, like I'm still the kid with the Squire who's like, okay, but like, how do you make it sound cool? You know, like where's the cool part of it? Like, where's the interesting part? Where's the thing I haven't heard before? You know, how do you get that out of it? Because you know it doesn't come from spending money, and you know it doesn't come from, you know what I mean? It's not like a fucking swag thing or a clout thing. It's like it's a heart thing, and
it's a creative thing. It's like a true pursuit of something. And that's honestly, like, there was, from that show till probably like a year or two, like probably like a year and a half, 2 years later, I saw many different incarnations of even the two-person.
Oh yeah,
of the Uniform.
so much. The first couple of years, like, we kept breaking gear. I mean, that first show was no exception. Like,
it was so great, dude. I was like, I love this. My shit. Fuck everybody. I'm here.
I don't want to talk shit, but I remember we shut down the Vitus PA one time.
It just happened, and you're the only one, and you can have that distinction. Your name is on the wall now. But that's what happens, you know. You try things are crazy, and you start building them into a better idea of what you're trying to arrive to at the moment, and that's really great, and that gives us Uniform in all its iterations. It really gives it the spirit of the fucking band, which is really like the thing that you're, you know, sort of always after, and just like that's the feeling that you know people want, and just being to kind of like feel that energy and that communicative kind of vibe. How you arrive to it, okay, you know what I mean? Unless like people are like super interested, mostly they're gonna remember the way you made them feel.
Yeah,
and that's really the key, you know.
And that's what it is at the end of the day, man. And like that's the point at the end of the day, is like we're creating, you know, a sensory experience with musicians. So we make music, we make sound. It's like organized sound and time, right? And depending on how you organize it, it'll make you feel things doing it, and it'll make other people feel things witnessing it. And like that's what we do on a very fundamental level. So like if you're not making it about that, that's what it is. And there's so much music out there, you know, and like it's not even like cool to be in a band anymore, I don't think, but there's still so many bands and so many people who are getting into being in bands because they think it's cool, or they think it makes them cool. And like, sure, you know, like it can, you know, I don't know. I think that what's cool is if people are like speaking their actual truth, or able to create something that hasn't been created before, or they're able to just communicate a legit feeling directly, whether or not it sounds new. I should be honest about that. I listen to all kinds of music. I don't just listen to shit that's never been done before. You know what I mean? I listen to all kinds of music. And anyone that's directly speaking their truth and communicating their shit, I'm down with
that.
You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
totally. It's the visceral thing, and that's what we're sort of looking for. So Ben, we got like a minute left. I just want to say thank you for joining us. It is
so
lovely lovely to hang out with you. You're the fucking best. I'll see you soon. I gotta bother you about music making things on my own.
Yeah.
And I'll talk to you. Cheers, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your night. We're out of here.